The Galactic Council convened in the vast chamber of Orion Prime, its crystalline walls pulsing with a soft, golden light. Representatives of 100 species had gathered, their forms as varied as the stars themselves, serpentine diplomats from the Nyx Dominion, towering insectoid strategists of the causal swarm, and at the center of it all, the imposing figures of the Zalzar warlords. The Zalzar, a race bred for conquest, stood clad in dark battle armor, their piercing red eyes filled with disdain. At the heart of the chamber, a holographic display flickered to life, showcasing Earth, pale blue, fragile against the black abyss. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as the High Speaker of the Council, an ethereal being of shifting energy, raised a luminous hand for silence. "The matter of humanity has been brought before us once more," the speaker intoned, voice resonating through the chamber. "They seek a place among the council, yet they are untested. Their history is one of war and division, but their strength remains unproven." A deep, guttural laugh echoed from the Zalzar delegation. Warlord Vrax, a towering figure with obsidian skin and a row of spined ridges along his jaw, stepped forward. "Unproven," he sneered. "They are not warriors. They are weaklings who fight among themselves, never against a true enemy. What strength do they possess that warrants them a seat among us?" The Kazal representative, a chittering mass of armored plates and razor-sharp mandibles, tapped its claws together. "Strength alone does not define worthiness," it hissed, "but cowardice should not be rewarded." When the Daleks invaded their outposts, did humanity stand its ground? No. They retreated. They bartered for peace rather than take up arms. Another wave of agreement surged through the chamber. Some species, the diplomats and traders, remained silent, observing. Others, the warriors and conquerors, nodded with satisfaction. To them, humanity was nothing more than a species of fearful children, unworthy of standing among giants. A single voice, calm yet firm, cut through the discussion. "Humanity has never needed to prove itself in the ways you understand." The council turned toward the speaker, Ambassador Elias Kane, Earth's lone representative. His suit, immaculate yet simple, stood in stark contrast to the ornate robes and battle-scarred armor surrounding him. His dark eyes held steady as he addressed the assembly. "You mistake prudence for cowardice. Humanity does not rush blindly into war. We do not seek destruction. But do not misjudge our restraint for weakness." Vrax bared his teeth in something between amusement and challenge. "Then prove it, Ambassador. Not with words, with action." A ripple of interest moved through the chamber. Kane folded his hands behind his back. "And what would you propose?" The Zalzar warlord stepped forward, the floor vibrating beneath his massive form. "A trial. A single human against the finest warriors of the known galaxy. No weapons. No technology. Only skill." His lips curled. "If your species is not as weak as we claim, surely one of you can stand against us." Silence followed. Kane's expression remained unreadable, but a flicker of something, perhaps amusement, perhaps calculation, passed through his gaze. He inclined his head slightly. "Very well." The chamber erupted into murmurs. A human accepting such a trial? Madness. The Zalzar were bred for war, their bodies dense with muscle, their reflexes honed to perfection. No human could survive against them unarmed. The speaker raised a hand once more. "Humanity has agreed to the challenge. The trial shall take place on Kartok, the crucible of war." The name alone sent a ripple of unease through the more diplomatic races. Kartok was a wasteland, a battlefield where even the strongest struggle to endure. "Choose your champion wisely, Ambassador." Kane offered a small, knowing smile. "Oh, I already have." 2 days later, aboard the diplomatic vessel Elysium, the weight of humanity's future rested on Kane's shoulders. The Council had granted him the right to choose Earth's representative. Military commanders had lobbied for their best soldiers, genetically enhanced operatives, or cybernetic war machines. But Kane had refused them all. Now he stood in the dimly lit training chamber, watching as a single figure moved with liquid precision. The man was clad in black, his body an extension of the shadows. His movements were effortless, each step silent, each strike a whisper of lethal intent. Kane exhaled. "You understand the stakes?" The figure straightened, though the hood obscured most of his features. His sharp gaze cut through the dim light. "I do." No weapons. No support. A faint, almost amused smile. "I won't need them." Kane studied him for a long moment before nodding. Then it settled. The man turned, the motion seamless, fluid. Kane had no doubt the Council believed humanity would send a soldier, a warrior of brute force. But that was their mistake. They expected war. They did not expect the unseen. The ninja vanished into the darkness, leaving only silence in his wake. Kartok was a graveyard of war. The air hung thick with a scent of scorched metal and damp earth, the remnants of long-forgotten battles buried beneath the shifting sands. Jagged cliffs and skeletal ruins loomed in the distance, casting long, fractured shadows beneath the twin moons. This was no mere battlefield. It was a crucible, a place where only the strongest survived. The trial had begun. A dozen Zalzar warriors spread across the landscape, their massive forms moving with calculated precision. Each of them was a living weapon, bred for war and sharpened by countless victories. Their armor, dark and battle-worn, bore the scars of previous conquests. Their eyes, glowing with predatory intensity, scanned the terrain for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. The human had vanished. Vrax, overseeing from a nearby ridge, narrowed his gaze. He had expected resistance, a desperate fight, the futile struggle of a creature cornered by its betters. Instead, there was silence. Unease crept into his thoughts, unspoken but present. He turned to his second-in-command, a veteran warrior with scars carved deep into his obsidian skin. "Where is he?" The warrior bared his teeth. "Hiding. Delaying the inevitable." Vrax grunted. "Then flush him out." The Zalzar spread into formation, sweeping the terrain with military efficiency. They moved in pairs, their steps heavy, their weapons ready. They were hunters, trained to track and kill. No prey had ever escaped them. Minutes stretched into an hour. The wind howled through the ruins, whipping dust into the air, but the human remained unseen. Frustration simmered beneath the surface. Then, without warning, one of the warriors collapsed. His partner turned, confusion flashing across his hardened features. The fallen soldier's body was still, his breathing shallow. There was no sign of struggle, no sound of attack. A moment later, another warrior fell. Panic rippled through the squad. They had trained against the deadliest enemies in the galaxy, had survived wars that shattered planets, but this was different. There was no enemy, no battle cry, no clash of blades. Just the silent, methodical unraveling of their ranks. Vrax clenched his fists. This was not war. This was something else. Then he saw it, just for a fraction of a second. A shadow moving against the wind, barely more than a blur, a ghost weaving through the chaos. His warriors turned, weapons raised, but it was too late. A flicker of movement, a whisper of steel, and another one fell. The realization struck with chilling clarity. The human was not fighting them. He was hunting them. One of the remaining warriors roared, unleashing a barrage of plasma fire into the darkness. The shots lit up the ruins, illuminating the skeletal remains of ancient war machines, the crumbling stone, the shifting sand. But nothing else. A heartbeat later, the warrior let out a strangled gasp. A black-clad figure emerged from the shadows, moving with a terrifying, fluid grace. The warrior lashed out, but the human was faster, sidestepping the blow with inhuman precision. A single strike, silent, efficient, sent the warrior to the ground. Vrax had seen enough. "Fall back," he growled. The surviving Zalzar hesitated. No enemy had ever forced them to retreat. But this was no ordinary battle. There was no ground to hold, no opponent to match strength against. There was only an unseen force, dismantling them one by one. They moved quickly, regrouping at the ridge where Vrax stood. Their breaths were heavy, their eyes filled with something unfamiliar. Not anger, not defiance, fear. Vrax turned his gaze toward the ruins, toward the darkness that now felt deeper, heavier. The human was still out there, watching, waiting. For the first time in his life, the warlord felt something gnaw at the edges of his certainty. The trial was not over, but it was no longer a test of humanity's strength. It was a demonstration of their deadliest truth. They were never meant to be seen. The last of the Zalzar warriors stood in a defensive circle, their bodies tense, their weapons raised. The once arrogant warlords, bred for conquest, were now reduced to prey. The battlefield had turned against them, transformed into a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty. The human had done this, not through brute force, not through overwhelming firepower, but through something far more terrifying: control. Vrax clenched his fists, his sharp teeth grinding together. His warriors were the strongest in the galaxy, trained to face any enemy head-on. And yet, they had been reduced to whispers in the dark, picked off one by one, their bodies left untouched but unconscious, stripped of their dignity. This was no ordinary opponent. This was something else, something unseen. A sudden movement, barely more than a ripple in the air. One of his men reacted, swinging his plasma blade in a wide arc, but it cut through nothing but silence. The warrior's breath hitched, his eyes darting, searching. Then, without warning, his legs buckled. He crumpled to the ground before his comrades could reach him. The circle tightened. This was no longer a battle. It was a lesson. Vrax's mind raced. The human had no weapons, no armor, no genetic enhancements. And yet, he had defeated an elite squadron with nothing but his hands and the shadows. That defied reason, defied everything Vrax had ever understood about war. A whisper of wind, a flicker of motion. Another warrior fell. The last 3 Zalzar remained, their muscles coiled, their every instinct screaming at them to run. But there was nowhere to go. The human was everywhere and nowhere, a phantom dancing between the seconds, slipping through the cracks of perception itself. Vrax exhaled slowly. "Show yourself." Silence. Then a voice, calm, unhurried. "I have." The ninja stood just beyond the reach of their weapons, his figure barely distinct from the night. His stance was relaxed, almost casual, but there was no mistaking the lethal precision coiled beneath his movements. The Zalzar had spent their entire lives preparing for war, but they had never trained for this. An enemy who fought without being seen, who struck without warning, who dismantled an entire squadron without shedding a single drop of blood. Vrax studied him, eyes narrowing. "You could have killed us." The ninja tilted his head slightly. "Yes." A cold realization settled over Vrax's mind. Mercy. That was what this was. Not weakness, not hesitation. Mercy. The human had defeated them without taking a single life, had shown them the vast gulf between their understanding of warfare and something infinitely more refined. Vrax's pride rebelled against the truth, but he could not deny it. He had mocked humanity, dismissed them as cowards, but now he saw the truth laid bare. Humanity was not weak. They were patient, calculated, deadly beyond comprehension. The warrior lowered his weapon. The others followed. There was no point in fighting. Not anymore. The ninja inclined his head slightly. Then, without a sound, he was gone. When Vrax and his surviving men returned to the Galactic Council, the chamber was silent. Every representative, every diplomat, every warlord had been watching. They had seen the trial unfold, had witnessed the impossible. Vrax stepped forward, his gaze locking onto the high speaker. The warlord, who had once laughed at the idea of humanity's strength, now stood changed. He inhaled deeply. "I withdraw my challenge," he said. His voice did not waver. "Humanity is no coward." A hush fell over the assembly. Even the most hardened warriors among them remained still. Ambassador Kane, standing at the edge of the chamber, allowed himself the smallest of smiles. He had known the truth all along. The Zalzar had sought to test humanity. Instead, humanity had tested them.